We all know that real estate has created more millionaires than any other industry on the planet. We also know that it has created a lot of heartache due to mismanagement, overborrowing, and just simple life events that happen to all of us. Welcome to the Cash Flow Pro podcast. My name is Casey Brown, and I am your fearless leader. And although we might be bourbon sipping and at times foul-mouthed Southerners, we will always do our best to be honest, straightforward, and due diligent with all of the information we pass along to you. Welcome to the show. Hey there, and welcome to today's episode of Cash Flow Pro, your daily real estate investing podcast and YouTube channel. I am here today with Pablo Gonzalez, and he told me to introduce him as the official hype man for JWB Real Estate Capital. And he is also the host of Not Your Average Investor, I think he said live show, which is then the podcast and so on and so forth. So Pablo, welcome, my friend. I can't wait to dive into this. As you and I were talking pre-show, there's so many interesting angles and so much value that you can bring to our audience, whether it be through the discussion of marketing, whether it be through the discussion of passive investing, which you've done yourself, or whether it's just the overall aspect of being a quote unquote hype man. So that's what we want to hear about. So Pablo, how are you today? Welcome.
Casey, I'm doing great, man. I love the energy. I love the intro. I'm super pumped to be here. There's nothing I value more than a new relationship. And just based on the little bit that we've talked before the show, man, I can tell we're going to be friends. So I'm here to serve, man. I want to add value to your audience and your people, man.
Awesome, brother. Awesome. That's what we like to hear. And really, so, you know, when we dive into this, and again, like I said, there's so many different angles that you and I discussed and so many different potential things that we could talk about that, you know, there's so much there. And so I would like to kind of start into, tell us a little bit about your background and tell us a little bit about how you got where you are right now, and then exactly what that is. And then we'll kind of take that moving forward and talk about the real estate part.
Yeah, I love that, man. That's gonna fit in nicely. As I was telling you, Casey, I was born in Venezuela, man, and I've kind of been somebody that's obsessed with relationships my whole life.
Yep.
Because as a kid, I was born in Venezuela. I then moved to the U.S. for a really short stint. And just long enough to enroll in preschool as the only kid that didn't speak English. and at that age, you know, you learn it really quick. And then immediately thereafter, my family moved to Spain, where they enrolled me in a British academy. And I remember walking in real cocky as a 3-4-year-old thinking, oh, well, now I know Spanish and English. I'm going to do great. And I went home crying because I didn't understand the British dialect or the Spanish. So it's kind of shaped me forever.
Yeah.
And this idea of being a fanatical like relationship creator has been the through line of my life that took me from Fortune 500 construction world. When I first graduated college, I became a green building expert. I started a green building company. I then got acquired by my biggest client in Miami that was a hospital developer. And at the same time, I got really involved in the community. And that taught me kind of everything that I'm executing right now. Once I started putting together the idea of how the most influential people in your city network and build relationships based on adding value to each other, how to leverage an audience. Once I created these like little groups of volunteers, I started leveraging them to get in front of the people that I most wanted to know. And then somewhere around 2017, I figured out who Gary Vee was and realized that content is kind of the game to magnify all that stuff. Yep. Started that put me to start a marketing company based on these principles. And in around mid 2019, I'm at I knew these guys, JWB Real Estate Capital. I invested with them in their private lending program around like 2014. Not a savvy investor by any means, but I wanted 10% on my money for some stuff that I had that I wanted to put in a short-term place. And to be honest, my lack of education, I pulled out early from that, right? I should have just kept re-upping, and I had these preconceived notions around what real estate is, and I was very affected by the 2008 financial crisis, and you know, in my late 20s, and it probably overinformed my actions.
Yep.
And lucky for me, I had moved to Jacksonville. I got invited to their volleyball tournament, and I met Gregg Cohen, who's the co-founder of the show of the company and my co-host on the Not Your Average Investor show. And at the time, Gregg was going through this. They started in 2006,
Yeah.
right? They started right before the Great Recession. And 24-year-old guy, two 24-year-old best friends from college that decided to get into real estate at a time when it was booming, lived through the Great Recession and realized that out of all the things they were doing, these 40 cash flowing rental income properties, no matter how much the world was burning down around them, were doing quite well for them, and
Yep.
decided to go all in on that around 2009, 2010, and have since then built this business that, quite frankly, now that I've been in the guts of it and really telling their story for the last 2.5 years, operates much more like a Silicon Valley startup than what you would expect a real estate company, a local Jacksonville real estate company to work like.
Sure.
And in doing so, they've served thousands of people and have returned money for everybody. So as he was in 2019, he was thinking about, as I want to grow this umbrella, as I want to go beyond this idea of Inc. 5000 fastest growing company and best places to work. I want to start putting our message out to the world. He was starting to experiment with content. And what I told him, he was kind of struggling with this idea of like, man, I have this idea and that idea and that idea, but I'm spending like 20, 25 hours a week just thinking about it and executing, and I'm not getting results.
Yeah.
And I was able to kind of convince him that, listen, man, what you need to think about is growing a community, not just a content stream. And the people in your network have a lot of value to each other. The people in your clientele and the people that you serve have a lot of value to you. The people in your team have a lot of value to each other. And if we can figure out a way to not put the burden of education just on what you can come up with, but instead highlight the people on your team, the people in the Jacksonville community that is making this one of the fastest growing metro areas in the United States for the last 7 years.
Yep.
And most importantly, the folks that invest with you, then you're able to answer the question of, is this interesting to me? Do I trust this guy? And who else is doing this? That is so crucial to anybody that's trying to put their money somewhere. So we started this Not Your Average Investor show. And, it started at January 2020 with a couple of interviews and this like one plan. March 2020, the fact that it's a live show when COVID hit ended up being this like amazing experience of having this like press conference situation happening every single week and being able to like calm the masses instead of having to take 1,000 phone calls, and just be able to speak to people from the podium and take questions and be transparent and tell people what's really going on the street level and not on the media level.
Yeah.
And by December 2020, we're having a fan appreciation show where like person after person was coming on talking about how the show added so much value to their life. They feel they're a part of the community. This is why they do business with JWB. And now since then, we've just like gone all in on this concept of this like content driven community stream and this like weekly talk show that is now leading to these meetups in Los Altos, California, and Denver and Pittsburgh and all these other places that are happening organically, because we were able to leverage the collective knowledge of our ecosystem to put it on display for others and be really, really transparent in a way to help people figure out what is the best way to reach retirement in a comfortable way.
Sure. Now, you said something, and my ears perked way up when you said that, and it was something that you went right over, and it's not, but you mentioned the term early in when you were talking about your investments back in 2014, and that term was overinformed. And I can't even begin. And overinformed kind of goes collectively in my mind with creating, like you said, you called it the content stream, like just a content stream and not developing something around that. And in this business, I think overinformed, and I had never even heard that term before 5 minutes ago. Of course, it's something you think about, is probably it's one of the poisons of this business, because so many people, they start geeking out and they listen to all the information they can listen to, and then before they know it, and again, I say this because I have some of these same tendencies, and becoming an overinformed individual means you just continued to sit and listen to podcasts and read books. And I'm somewhat, again, I have some of these tendencies, and that hit me square between the eyes, because I'm like, whoa, okay, yeah, that's like I need to be in overinformed anonymous or overinformed rehab or something, because it's, and I guess it's the same thing that what we call in the real estate or the capital raising space when we get to underwriting properties, called analysis paralysis, where you get stuck doing analysis. You get stuck analyzing everything, and you analyze it to death. And so becoming an overinformed individual can make you get too far into your own head about, and then before you know it, you become indecisive and scared money don't make no money, and then you become scared and you don't make no money, and that's the hillbilly way to say it: scared money don't make no money. But that's something that I really would like to go back just a
Yeah.
little bit, and maybe have you dig into how you as an individual solved that problem. um, like, do you remember some of maybe the steps you took to kind of, I
Yeah, man.
don't want to say become less informed, because that's not responsible either, but you want to become an action taker? I guess that's the cusp of it all, is saying, I want to become an action taker instead of just a listener.
Casey, I love that you dove in on that, man. That's a really, really great, astute observation. And your take on it was very different from my original intent when I said it, but it really rings true to me, right? Like there is this idea that you can only learn about something so much before you have to go take action. And I think there is a big error in entrepreneurs, investors, in people that are trying to make a change, where they're just sitting there getting overinformed on something before realizing that experiential um, information is something that needs to happen to you before you can actually be an expert, before you can actually be a user of something. You can't read about push-ups to get in shape.
Correct.
When I, for me, when you're saying it, when I originally said it, I meant it as lack of diversification in my thought process, right? And I go back to this idea of lack of diversification because it's a pillar concept in investing.
Yeah.
I also consider diversification in, I'm so obsessed with networking because I believe that networking is diversification of influence,
Right.
right? And if all you're influencing is this like one room of people, the moment that something happens in this like one room of people, you're screwed, right? Like that
Yep.
changes.
Yep.
Therefore, uh, as far as relationships go, I'm a big believer in diversification there, and that leads to this diversification of knowledge and access and skills and different things that you have. So, to answer your question, I addressed it the same exact way that I've addressed everything in my life, right? Like when I was kind of like stuck at this spot in this construction company after they acquired me and I felt that they kind of pigeonholed me, instead of sitting in the same room trying to impress my boss, I went out and formed a bunch of different committees for nonprofits and got on different boards to diversify my influence and diversify my career path that led me to where I'm at right now.
Sure.
For my financial education, I've had the great fortune of being able to go from guy that didn't really understand what I had invested in and was operating under the, one paradigm of understanding real estate cycles and maybe one asset class and in one geography, to forming this community of people that we talk to on a weekly basis that has now exposed me to the different asset classes within real estate, the different experiences for different people in different parts of their life and different risk profiles and different investment profiles and the different paths that they've all taken to now get to this, to either be at the place where they're happy and they're good, to be halfway there, to be beginning, right? So like for me, this my answer to being overinformed in anything is go out there and talk to more people, get more experiences, learn different viewpoints, as opposed to being in an echo chamber of people telling you that there's only one way of doing something.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the age of social media has led to that problem kind of exacerbating itself in the fact that like so many people think that, the way some of those algorithms work is if you like a couple of different posts from somebody, then all of a sudden that algorithm picks it up and you're going to start seeing more posts about what you liked.
Yeah.
And so if you like the fact that, let's just say, the government is doing something that you don't necessarily agree with, okay, well then all of a sudden you see 15 or 20 of those posts a day from random people that you don't know. Then all of a sudden you have this idea that, well, man, I guess everybody thinks that, and we must really be onto something here, when in fact it's not it's not a common thread, I guess, really. But so that was really intriguing to me, and how you overcame that, and how you, well, I guess really the fact that maybe you meant something different when you said it, but I took it
No,
as a way of like saying, hey, this is something that I think is really is really what people experience. um
it is, man. And you're right. You're 100% right that people experience that, and you can get in your own echo chamber. And to kind of bring it all back together to how to overcome it from both sides, right? Is the idea that you can be learning about something for only so long, then you got to go out and experiment with it.
yep,
And then if you really want to dial it in, you start teaching people about it,
yep,
right? Then you can truly become knowledgeable on the situation.
yep,
And all of that works better when the fountain of knowledge comes from a bunch of different places, when your experience is yours, but then you share it with a bunch of different people. And then it gets to be scrutinized from different filters, right? So, like for me, I had not been exposed to a lot of real estate investors when I lived in Miami. So when I did this private lending thing, and I hadn't been exposed to the dynamics of the Jacksonville market, I hadn't been exposed to rich dad, poor dad,
yeah.
right? Like,
Ah,
like I didn't know anything, man. I just knew that my buddy Rich, that was one of my best friends in college, I lived in Jacksonville, knew these guys that started this JWB company, and they had been getting 10% on their money and re-upping all the time. And I was like, all right, shit, I got these like 60 grand that I'm really gonna that I want to hold in like a medium length, like a short length kind of investment, and I want good money on it.
yep,
Went in on it, and when it came back out, it was like election time and a couple of other things. So I gave a lot of like importance to these factors that didn't matter. I didn't
sure,
understand that Jacksonville has these like is a market where rents are above the national average and housing pricing is below the median average. I didn't understand that there's only a couple of places that you can buy cash flowing real estate on day one that allows for these five other profit centers of appreciation, tax savings, debt pay down, inflation hedging, and cash flow to like kick into effect to build this long term vehicle. I didn't realize that if I own pieces of real estate in 5, 10 years, I get access to these like financial vehicles and advantages that people don't get, like being able to get really cheap debt on the equity that you've gained to invest in other things, 1031 exchanges. I didn't realize that this company is super, super unique in their long-term outlook of what they're doing and the way that they built it with this like data flywheel, right? Like I just wasn't informed on, I, I was just going by again, to your point, what I saw in my Facebook feed, right? Like,
sure. That's
hey, there's an election that's going from like, Democrat to Republican, and I don't know what's about to happen here, and so things are going to change. But I didn't realize that the amount of things that you can control inside of the deal that are not affected by these externalities that are always yelling in our ear that are so far from the deal. It's almost like national politics versus local politics, right? Like the mayor of your town is going to affect your life much more than the president, but
That's
you
right.
spend way less time thinking about that dude than you think about the president, right?
Yep.
Like so it's that piece of it just had not come together, and I've had now the great fortune of going back in and like learning this thing, investing in it, and then talking about it with a bunch of other people that have allowed me to truly understand what the play here is that I'm getting into, right?
That's right. That's right. And spot on. we spend more time thinking about the president than we do the things that are actually happening local, the potholes that need to be fixed, the things that are actually happening in our area
Yeah.
versus because again we stick our head up into that echo chamber where people are just like bah 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 bah, and it's just like eventually you have to pull your head down out of the cloud, down out of the Facebook newsfeed clouds,
Yeah.
and start deciding to do what's best for you,
Yep.
not worry so much about I don't hardly ever want to get political on this show at all. This is not necessarily one way or the other, but one thing that I always ask, because I'm anti. I don't. I have a Facebook, but I unfollowed every single one of my friends. I don't have any news feed at all. I don't do any of that stuff. But one of the things that I had a question about, and it's been a while ago, was between when President Obama was in office and George W. Bush was in office. Okay, and when the two somewhat they kind of overlap there, right there, and everybody that I know in a staunch conservative state of Kentucky was just mad, 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 mad. And so when he came up for reelection in 2012, I said, I wasn't for or against any of them. So I want to say that. But I said, name one thing that is worse in your life today than it was 4 years ago.
Yeah.
And every 4 years I go through that. Now, I don't want to hear, well, the government's wasting this and the government, I don't want to hear that. I want to hear, what did you have air in your tires before then? And now you don't have air in your tires. That is something that affects you directly.
Yeah.
And once you ask that question and you really get down to the nitty gritty of what is just one thing, I'm not even asking about a laundry list. I'm not even asking about 10 things. I'm asking about one thing. And I think that when that question is asked, and if there's much thought put behind it, people are like, oh, yeah, that's right. That I mean, we're still happy, we're still healthy, we still have plenty to eat, we still
Right.
have clean water coming out of the faucets, we still have, the basics of life are still there. And so it's the same concept when we start talking about these types of things where just just do what's best for you, okay, and stop worrying about everybody else and how everybody talks about social media ruining the planet. Well, my kids got a VR headset on their face almost all the time, and I'm like, no, that's what's ruining the planet, or that's what's ruining. And anyway,
We'll see.
they'll
Yeah.
they'll find their way out of it, like my generation did our TV box. I mean,
Yeah.
we found our way out of it, and here we are.
Yeah.
So, but no, man, that's just so many relatable subjects there that again we could spend hours diving into any one of them.
Yeah.
Um,
You know what I love about what you said, Casey? To me, it really comes down to it's again the overinformation,
that's right.
right? Like if you are overinformed with what's happening in the stratosphere and you are not touching the ground, you're wrong, bro. Like
Right.
chances are you're wrong. Like I
Yeah.
very much believe in this when it comes to investing, right? Like know your asset class, touch it, right? Like be a part of the life of the people that are a part of this, like really understand it from the top to the bottom. I
Yep.
believe it in business, right? Like I love to think of strategy, but if you are not speaking to what is happening in the marketplace and you're not interacting with the marketplace, right? Like that's why we started this whole and I really, really believe it in content, in marketing, right? Like I that is why we started this as a live interactive show as opposed to a podcast that then goes out, right? Like I call it the difference between audience in and relationship out, right? Like I really believe that most of the time when we're thinking of things, we think of what's out
No.
there, how can I reach these things in the ecosphere, as opposed to like, who do I need to talk to right now? Let's talk to this dude. And from here it mushrooms out, right? Like
Well, and
so
for those people like myself that are very process minded, that like for me, the only way to get me to understand anything is to put some type of process thought into it. Like you said, audience in, relationship out. And once you can develop those little segments in between those two, then you really become that's when you can really start leveraging your abilities. Hi, this is Casey Brown, host of the Cash Flow Pro podcast and YouTube channel. Have you been thinking about investing in real estate but just don't know where to begin? I'd like to help by inviting you to check out our website at www.3000capital.com. There you will find an array of material that will help you learn all about real estate syndication. And while you're there, be sure to check out our free video series download titled 5 Must-Know Keys to Success in Passive Real Estate Investing. I'd also like to personally thank you for making Cash Flow Pro part of your day. Now, back to the show. Now, and I always tell my wife, and I love you, honey, but I'm always like, she's like, well, what about this? I'm like, okay, yeah, we'll do that. Well, what if I do that? Then it causes this. And I'm like, listen, just make the decision. Make the decision and let's go. Let's go forward. And once we get into it, if it's the wrong decision, then, we haven't killed anybody. Let's get up. We'll back up a little bit and we'll move over here and then we'll start going that direction. But it's just, and that's the whole thing is, and I think a lot of people suffer from that same thing is it's just make a decision, go with it. And, and my stepdad always told me sometimes stuff like that costs money. I mean, sometimes making the wrong decision costs money. The only thing you can do is look at that money as a loss and get mad about it and forget about it, or you can have that loss of money cause you to have an education and chalk it up to this is what it costs to get this education. So, well, man, like I said, there's so many different facets to that we could go on and on and on and on and on for days about how networking and how all of that stuff can be an over information and over informed thought process can really be the detriment to whatever it is your end goal is. Okay. And if you never get started, then you never get started. And so, with that being said, I'd like to kind of shift the conversation a little bit to one thing that you and I had chatted about right before we jumped on the episode here was your networking, specifically your networking skills and this community. And I think maybe we've even hit on that just a little bit throughout this conversation, but I'd like to know, so when the community when you started talking to them about shifting from a content stream to building a community around that content stream, what were your first steps in saying, hey, this is what we're going to do to build this community?
Yeah, man, great question. First of all, credit to Gregg who took a shot on me, right? Like at this point, I was just a guy spinning out ideas about this and that.
Sure,
and I had worked with a couple of like best-selling authors. I had never worked with a $150 million company that's been on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, right? Like,
yeah.
So this is like my big break. Casey, the first thing that we thought was, who are the people that we are looking to serve?
Okay.
And what do they need to know about to feel secure in going through this transformation that we want to help them with, right? So specifically for somebody that's going to invest in a single family home that they never ever have to like look or touch or even go visit in Jacksonville, Florida, we thought of these 5 we call them content lanes, right?
Okay.
And it is real estate education, right? Like what is the economics of real estate? What are the different types of real estate that you can invest in? Other asset class education, right? Like what is the difference between investing in vertically integrated single family home versus crypto versus stock market versus bonds versus gold versus all the other things that are out there.
Mm-hmm.
We thought about Jacksonville market education. Why Jacksonville? Why is this different than buying a home in Hairy Knuckle, Florida, right?
Okay.
Or Miami or Tampa. I don't know. Yes, I'm pretty sure it is for the record. Florida, man, Florida. Why is Jacksonville different, right? Like, what is it special about this macro economy that I kind of hit on before, right? Like these like dynamics of pricing and a well-rounded economy and this quality of life stuff that help with the trends. Who else is touching my money, right? Like, what in-house expertise do we have here that we can showcase as expertise and thought leadership around property management, around site selection, around portfolio building, around construction, right? Like all the different things that go into vertically integrating this asset class.
Okay.
And most importantly, who else is doing this, right? Like if I am a 41-year-old entrepreneur that is trying to build a company and also have a retirement plan, are other people with that same, and I have, X to put into the marketplace, and I have this much in stocks and this much in other things, are other people like me doing this? And does that make sense, right? Like we've had everything from me, who I just described my profile, to like a 75-year-old member of our community that's in Northern California that reached retirement and was upside down in his cash flow and could only get like, $1,500 to $2,000 a month in Social Security, but he had this home in Silicon Valley, California, that he was able to get a reverse mortgage on and then put that money into multiple rental income properties that all of a sudden increased his cash flow to $3,500 a month. And then a couple years later, with a little bit of appreciation, was able to double down and get some equity to buy two more properties and increase his cash flow for $5,000 a month, right? Like the idea that, is somebody at that stage in life still good for this asset class, right? So like I call that outsourcing context. But the story, what you asked me is the idea of like, what is the first step? The first step is identify the people that you want to serve, and then identify what is interesting to them to help them on the transformation that you want to help with, and having the humility to know that your solution is only one part of the equation. Like we could have called it the rental property in Jacksonville show, but we didn't. We called it Not Your Average Investor Show, because if you think a little bit different and you're open to these other asset classes, we want to give you the whole pie to make your own decision on it. And then once we figured out what those pieces of information were, the next move was, who do we know that can speak to this thing in a good manner that can help people understand that people are interested in meeting? And then once you have that in place, right? Like who the person that you're trying to serve is, what are the things that they need to know to like take a step forward in their journey, and who else they want to meet. Now you can set up this situation where on a weekly way, you're showing up to feel like you're being introduced to somebody that you wanted to meet, to talk about something that you wanted to talk about. And oh, by the way, you're also going to meet a whole bunch of other people that are trying to go through this transformation with you together.
Yep.
And then show up and do it and provide value and make it about them.
Yeah. And that's, and there you go. That's it. And that really is just a different way of saying lead with value. I mean, everything you just said there kind of connects to that, and that's lead with value. And so many people forget that, because my favorite, I was actually, as a matter of fact, I was thinking about this morning. I was like, okay, there's a couple of different internet tasks that I've got to have done, and I always hate going to like Upwork and you hire somebody, and then all of a sudden you get somebody that claims they're an expert in this, what you need, but then you read their profile and they're also claiming they're an expert in another 1,000 things, and it's like, really, I don't think you can be an expert in all of those things. You might be able to, what they used they used to call that a jack of all trades, master of none kind of thing. And so, and I can't tell you how many hundreds of those people that when I first started down the path of learning digital marketing and internet stuff that I dealt with, so many jack of all trades. And there again, and it's lead with value, know what you're doing, and go deep on that one or two things. Go as far deep as you can and learn those things. Don't try to gather all this other stuff at the top, because you're never going to get to the bottom and do that. So but the community, so how does the community look today? First of all, when did you all start? What year was that when you kind of started saying, let's build this community? And then how did it look versus how it looked then, and then how it looks today?
Dude, it's honestly my favorite thing, right? Like it's we started January 2020. Um, Nowadays what the community looks like is we have I don't know if we've crossed 4,000 yet, but we have like a high 3,000 person Facebook group.
Hmm.
But it all stems from this twice a week show that we host. And
Okay.
that twice a week show gets somewhere between 50 to like 70 people per show twice a week, right? So it's like interacting with like 100 to 120 people every single week. Um, and out of that, it's generally we have probably about like I would say like 35 to 40 regulars that come to every single show and are very much a part of it. And then there's other people that come in that are like interested that show up every once in a while. Other people that are new, they're just like, I want to see what
Sure.
this company is about. And what we found is that like the great value, right? Year one, we stood up a $40 million client acquisition channel, right? Like they were trying to figure out how to create sales from online activities. They had very few, pretty negligible. It went up by 40 million on organically searched, come into the website, and then all of a sudden end up buying a property, right? And
Yeah.
what we've realized that most of that value has come from that core group of 25 that became super fans early on, right? Like it all stems from that social validation of them being a part of it.
Yep.
Those are the folks that have been organizing meetups in different places. And what I can tell you is that right now we've literally we had probably about like a 20 or so person meetup in Northern California. We had about a 15-person meetup in Seattle. We had about a 15, 20-person meetup in Denver. There's one coming up in Pittsburgh. There's one coming up in Jacksonville that we expect about 60 people to come to. So it's become this thing greater than ourselves
Yep.
where people are, they're showing up to this call, and now the content on the call is one part of the call. What's happening in the chat, like of people just like catching up with each other and making friends is a whole nother content stream because people are literally there full of like inside jokes and when somebody's like curious about something, someone like a Lee Bishop or a Marilyn Cotterman or other super fans of the show are like, hey, you can call me whenever you want and we can talk about this and I can explain to you how to do it 1031, right?
Sure.
So when you say what it looks like, I would say it's and all of this without that many podcast downloads, right? You and me were talking about this like pain of podcast downloads. We get about, we get probably about like 250 podcast downloads per week. Not a huge audience, right?
Yeah.
On the
Yeah.
podcast side, but the people that are tuned in are so tuned in, and it all comes from inside out that the value starts like right at the interaction. And I would say, based on the amount of podcast downloads, based on the people that show up, we probably have like a really active set of maybe 200 to 250 people that are very, very involved that will show up to these live events. And then it all trickles out from there. But those 200 to 250 people are legitimately friends with each other and with us, and provide this like exponential value to anybody that touches the ecosystem. Because if you're worried about something, those 200 people have all walked different. There's everything from like a guy that invested in alpaca farming before he got into real estate to somebody that doesn't own their own home and owns a couple of rental properties and everything in between, man.
Yeah.
So like it's
And
just a really,
to
really
have
interesting group
that,
of people.
to have a core group like that, that's not a bunch of self-serving people, is has got to be. I mean, that's a feat in and of itself. I mean, that's pretty thick right there. Just because most people are like, and you always, we're so used to dealing with people that only care about whatever they can. How can they use this to benefit themselves instead of just saying, hey, yeah, let me help you with that. And
Yeah,
then
man.
outside of that, then all of a sudden, you're buying something from them or whatever. You know what I'm saying? And then instead of the people that come in, they're like, they won't even talk to you unless you show interest in buying their product. Then they. But anyway, so listen, we've gone a little over here, which is fine. It's been a great talk. I'd like to ask a couple of different questions, just off the cuff questions that there's no right or wrong answer to. But I'd like for you to tell the audience what is the best book that you've recently read or are reading.
Oh man, play bigger. There's a concept called category design, that once you understand it, you can't unsee it. And it's essentially how to design your own market category and dominate it and be the category king, and how you become synonymous with the problem you solve, right? The reason why that when I say social network or MP3 player or smartphone or streaming video, you think of only one person.
Yeah.
It's the playbook on all of it. And once you start understanding these patterns of who is a company that's actually trying to design and dominate a category and who isn't, it will completely change the way that you operate your business and the way that you invest in the stock market. Because if you look at the S&P 500, there is something around like less than 20% of them are category designers,
Mm-hmm.
yet they make up more than like 80% of the growth of the S&P 500 over the last 10 years. It's
Sure.
fascinating. So play bigger.
Play bigger. Awesome, man. That's great. That's a good one. That's one we hadn't heard, I don't think. What is your dream vacation that you have either taken or hope to take?
Oh man, I'm all right. Let's talk about the one I hope to take, because I've had this plan forever and it's been canceled multiple times. Peru. I've
Peru.
been I've been wanting to go. I love to surf. Peru has amazing surf destinations, right? They have this wave called Chicama that's like the longest left point break in the world that you can ride for like 5 minutes, which is insane. Lima is this amazing culinary center that is on the ocean, and then they have the Amazon and Machu Picchu and Lake Titicaca.
Yeah.
Like I've had this like 2 week trip planned to Peru 3 different times in my life that's been canceled for multiple reasons. Last time was COVID.
Yep.
But yeah, man, I've been dying to do this Peruvian adventure that I would love to do.
Man, that's awesome. I've always wanted to see Machu Picchu. I don't. As I'm sure you're shocked to know, I'm not much of a surfer, but
Not a lot of surf in northern Tennessee, huh?
no, 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 not much surfing here. I mean, we've got mosquitoes, and sometimes the mosquitoes get as big as dogs. I don't know; they're kind of scary, but we've got mosquitoes and snakes and that kind of stuff. But no surfing, no surfing yet. I think it's on its way though. So
We'll see.
all right. So if the listeners heard something that they connected with, that they want to be a part of your community, they want to be find out more about JWB Capital or Not Your Average Investor Show, whatever it is they want to find out, what is the best way for somebody to reach out to you?
Best way is to join us on the show, man. See what I'm talking about. Like come experience this awesome community. Show up a couple times. You'll get a nickname and you'll feel like you'll feel part of the family. Look for the Not Your Average Investor Show if you want to listen to it on the podcast. But really, the best experience is go to nyais.com, which is notyouravageinvestorshow.com, nyais.com. Register for the show. Put it on your calendar so that you get the alerts and show up one of these times. And I promise you're going to have a good time. You're going to learn something, and you're going to walk away thinking, I want to be friends with these people. And I want to be friends with you, by the way, listener that just hung out with us. I desperately want to be your friend.
He told you he wants relationships, and there's nothing he values more than those relationships. So somebody that wants to lead with the value that he's brought here to this show, and just and sometimes we don't necessarily hit all over real estate investing. Sometimes we hit on the ability to open your eyes wide enough and to be able to see what's going on around you, and that will enable people to understand this minor concept of owning a sliver of an LLC that owns underlying properties. And so again, it's opening your eyes up. It's the I don't want to drag on it any longer, but it's the whole, why do we have to learn algebra? Why do we have to learn geometry in high school? We've never used that, blah, blah, blah. It's not about you learning that equation. It's about you learning to open your mind and open your eyes up and be receptive to things that maybe you don't understand. So anyway,
Casey, can I say something real quick?
yes, absolutely.
If you're listening to Casey's show, man, like you can tell that Casey really, really cares a lot about this show. Go share this with a friend. It doesn't have to be this episode. Go to your favorite episode, text it to a buddy. It doesn't take a lot of work to like just leave a review. You can just hit 5 stars on whatever thing you're at without even putting a review, but it helps him even more if you also write in what you like about Casey and what you learn on the show. So man, I can tell you put a lot of love into this. And for anybody that's been hanging out with us here for like 45 minutes, take an extra 1 minute, go do it for Casey, pay it forward. I think more people need to listen to your voice, man. I think it's important.
Awesome, man. I do appreciate that. Pablo, thank you so much for taking your time And thank the folks at JWB Capital or Real Estate Capital for having you on board with them in order to bring my show value to my listeners. So Pablo, thank you, sir.
It's been a pleasure, my friend.
Hope everybody has a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you.
Cashflow Pro is hosted by Casey Brown, founder and CEO of 3000 Capital, a commercial real estate investment firm committed to providing its investors with ongoing cash flow and helping them build long-term wealth. If you enjoyed today's podcast, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you'll be notified about all our future episodes. You can find more information about us and our investment philosophy by clicking the link in the show notes below. Thanks for listening.